A lot of discussion earlier about the NDAA, the Defense Authorization Bill, the very important provisions that are contained in that that will provide for our men and women who serve us so honorably. I would concur with all who have spoken today about the importance and the significance of this bill and why we should pass it and why we should pass it today. An area of controversy that has certainly come up, and my colleague from Oklahoma has pointed it out very, very clearly, is the lands package, the public lands package that has been attached to the NDAA. And I want to speak a little bit to where we are today, why we are dealing with this, and why it is important to this Senate, this Congress, and really the country that we advance these public lands provisions. I had an opportunity to speak in greater detail yesterday, but I felt it was important to let colleagues know why we deal with public lands bills historically, traditionally, in a package. Madam President, you come from a Western state, but you don't come from a Western state where there are large portions of your state that are held by the federal government. In the 12 Western states that include Alaska, 93% of the federal lands that are held by this country are contained in these 12 Western states. So what does it mean when you're a state like Alaska, where some 68% of your lands are federally held? What does it mean when you're a state like Nevada, like our majority leader is from, where 85% of your state is held in public lands? It means that when you want to do a conveyance doesn't come about just because you're able to get a real estate attorney and you go down and you have a transaction. It literally requires an act of Congress. We're dealing with one provision in this public lands bill that Senator Franken has been working on from Minnesota. It's a conveyance of 1 acre of land that is currently held by USGS, and it's a conveyance to a school district. Most people around this country, or certainly on this end of the country, would say, wow, that really requires congressional action? That really requires a vote? That really requires the president to sign it into law? And the answer is in the affirmative. So we have been processing, as a committee, on the Energy Committee and committees on the House side, we have been processing public lands bills throughout this Congress. We have been working on some of these public lands measures, not for months, not for years, but in several instances, a decade to bring about some of these conveyances and these exchanges. And so I think it is important that those that are suggesting that somehow or other this is conjured up in the dark of the night, or there has been no process for these bills, I think it is important to set that record straight and to let colleagues know about the procedural process that has led to its inclusion in the NDAA. For the record, I would note that the process included not only the committees of jurisdiction for the lands bills, but the committees who crafted the NDAA bill, leadership from both sides, individual members all coming together to really cobble together a package that was fair and balanced, bipartisan, bicameral, revenue neutral, exceptionally important, and really a lands package that addresses both the need for conservation on one end and economic development and jobs and prosperity on the other end. And so with this package of bills, you see that compromise come together. Now, it's been noted that these public lands bills have nothing to do with defense authorization. Well, That in fact may be a long stretch, but I will tell you that this is not without precedent. Adding lands to an NDAA bill has been done in the past. We've seen it in the past several NDAAs. What we did here was to amend the existing land package within the House-passed NDAA, hardly out of bounds or unusual. And as I've said before, I would much rather have us move individual bills through the floor as we process them. But many members have suggested to me that, well, your small lands transaction is important, but does it really rise to the level of occupying floor time? It's tough to win the undivided attention of the Senate on some of these measures. But just because it doesn't rise to the level of keen interest here in this body doesn't mean that these are critically important for individuals, communities, states around our country. And so it is hard to put that together. But just because it's small or more localized or perhaps more parochial, like this 1 acre of land that we're trying to convey to the school district, doesn't mean that we should disregard it or overlook it or not try to enact them, because they're somehow or other not as important as the other things that we do around here. So knowing how valuable and how precious floor time is around here, we work together. We've been working together for months, again, bicameral, bipartisan, to combine many of the proposals, the bills that you see in the package. And the result of what we have in front of us are provisions that will help boost natural resource and community development, again, while we're also advancing conservation. We're moving towards economic development in certain areas, creating jobs. We have opportunities in both Nevada and Arizona to create thousands of good-paying jobs, increase our resources and our mineral security. And then in other aspects of the bill, yes, we do focus on conservation. Yes, there are additional wilderness provisions that are in. But I think, again, as we attempt to achieve that balance, what you have in front of you is a good structure. I want to make sure that colleagues recognize, again, that when we are discussing the concerns that my colleague from Oklahoma has raised, the concern that he has so well articulated, that within our national park system, we have a maintenance backlog that is awful. In many cases, it's overwhelming. And to his credit, he has given keen attention to this maintenance backlog that we have and has pressed us to do more. He put together a very considerable report that we are using in the Energy Committee to help build out a series of reforms, necessary reforms, that will be required to deal with our issues within the National Park Service. And it's from Senator Coburn's good work on this that I think we will be able to see some true reforms. I met just yesterday afternoon with Director Jarvis in my office, and I have made very clear to him, as the head of Park Service, that this is going to be an area that we must be focusing on. Our national parks are a national treasure, but when we can't attend to their needs, if we can't ensure that they are maintained to the level that as Americans we would all want, then we're failing on that. So he has a very, very good point when he says, we need to be doing something about maintenance and backlog. I agree. We actually have a couple provisions in this public lands bill that will help us with that, and one of them is the bill that Senator Coburn has sponsored, which will allow for donors to have discrete recognition within our parks. So if you want to give a private donation, there is a way for recognition. We also have a provision in here that would allow for a minting of a coin that will help, again, with private dollars. And those private pieces are very important, but we need to do more. And we will do more. And that's my commitment to help do that. One of the things that I think is important to recognize that with the park provisions that are included in Title 30, it is critically important to recognize the local support that these park provisions have that will encourage economic development, tourism, recreation. The agreement includes 5 new national historic parks. It transfers management of 2 existing federal agency areas to the Park Service. All of the new historical parks have been formally studied, and they have been recommended for inclusion in the national park system. They focus on specific historic sites of national significance. Then there's also studies, which my colleague has referenced, studies for potential additions to the park system. These study authorizations have previously passed the House under suspension or gone through the Senate by unanimous consent. So again, Madam President, this is nothing that we're trying to do a back door. The study that has gone on, the process on both the House side and the Senate side that has been underway to ensure that there is that local support, that this is not just something that a member wants to attach his or her name to, that this has that local support, and that in turn will help us with some of the funding issues that we're going to need to address for our park systems. I want to just conclude my remarks quickly here because Senator Flake has asked for a few minutes, and I would like to defer to him for a moment. But the issue has also come up about existing national heritage areas, and I think it's important for colleagues to know that we do provide for extensions, limited extensions for existing heritage areas, but there are no new heritage areas that are created. And I think it's important to recognize that when we talk about extensions, it is extensions of existing heritage sites. So with that, if I may, Madam President, I'd like to yield to my colleague from Arizona, Senator Flake. We have been working not only with Senator Flake, but with Senator McCain on a provision that will certainly not only benefit his state, but it will benefit the United States in terms of jobs, economic opportunity, and a mineral resource, namely copper, that is extraordinarily important to us. And with that, I'd like to turn to Senator Flake.
Madam President, I thank
Senator from Arizona.
I thank the gentlelady from Alaska for yielding, and I want to thank her for her hard work on this lands package. These are difficult pieces of legislation to put together. It's particularly difficult living in the West when you have states like Arizona that are about 87% publicly owned by either the federal government, state government, or tribal governments. And to have access and have rural communities have access to economic development when you're dealing with resources that are often on these lands, and when land exchanges need to be done, it's extremely difficult to do that because it's often seen as a parochial interest, and it's difficult to get support from around the country for something that's needed in Arizona without putting a package together that has other items that are needed in other states, particularly in the West. And so I want to compliment the gentlelady from Alaska and others who worked so hard to put this complex package together that has many beneficiaries, and also to put it together in a way where we're not contributing or increasing the size of the federal and the state, that we're promoting economic development in states like Arizona. As the gentlelady mentioned, with regard to Arizona and what this does, it allows a land exchange to happen that will allow a copper mine to be developed that will ultimately produce, likely or can produce about 25% of the copper needed for manufacturing and for use in this country. That's not just an economic development issue, that's a national security issue as well, to make sure that we are more independent with regard to our source minerals. And in terms of economic development of the state, it's huge. We're talking about thousands of jobs over the next several decades that will be produced and will continue. Economic development for the rural communities of Superior, Globe, and Miami that have had a tough time. And this will be really good for those communities and for the entire state. So I commend, again, those who put this together. It's never good to see big packages with so many things in them. That's what we want to get away from, and hopefully we can in the new Congress. But it's been very difficult to move individual pieces of legislation over the past couple of years. And so unfortunately, we're often saddled with trying to put together a package and attaching it to a larger bill, as was the case here. But again, kudos to those who worked so hard to put it together. And I appreciate the indulgence of this body to have a package like this in the NDAA. And I plan to vote for it and encourage my colleagues to do the same. I yield back.
Madam President, I thank
Senator from Alaska.
I thank my colleague from Arizona, and as he has pointed out, not only is this measure important to the state of Arizona, but the state of Nevada will also gain the benefit of being able to access copper resources in that region as well, bringing jobs and bringing a resource. So contained in this package, and again, a balanced package, when we're talking about the federal land conveyances for economic and community development, we've mentioned the opportunity for mineral production with 2 copper mines, one in Arizona, one in Nevada, opportunity for increased timber production in my state. We will finally realize the obligation to settle the land claims with the native people of the southeastern part of the state in the Sealaska region, 40-some years after the promise for their land's conveyance. They are still awaiting their conveyance. This measure that we have in front of us will not only fulfill that decades-old promise, but it will allow for a continuation of timber within their region, albeit very, very, very reduced. But in order to move to that second growth transition that Forest Service is always talking about, you have to have an industry that's just staying alive. And this Sealaska Lands provision will help with that. But it was also crafted in a way that took into account the concerns of the fisheries, the stewardship for other lands, placing additional lands in conservation area. So again, a keen balance. The other provisions that relate to our federal lands and our ability to access them, I think are important, making them productive. The provision allows for land management agencies with the needed authority to renew and process grazing permits and leases. This is a measure that my colleague from Wyoming, my colleague from New Mexico have been working on. And in terms of something that provides certainty to America's ranching community, this is so keen, this is so important. We also work to expand the successful BLM permit streamlining program to boost oil and gas production from the federal lands. So that's kind of the economic development piece, but the conservation piece, I think, is equally important. It does designate wilderness, designates approximately 245,000 acres of wilderness in total, but I think what's important for colleagues to recognize is that just about half of those acres are already managed as if it were wilderness. In other words, they're in wilderness study areas or roadless areas. And so, again, we looked at those measures where there was support at the local level, at the state level, represented by the members of Congress who had worked over the years to gain the level of support for these provisions. There's no cram down, there's no designation from the executive as to monument status. This is how the process is designed to work. We also returned 26,000 total wilderness study areas to multiple use, again, for greater activity on those lands. We protect private property rights in all of our special land designations. There's no private property that can be condemned or acquisitions through eminent domain. Private activities taking place outside of the special land designation are not going to be precluded by such designations, and we have ensured that there's no buffer zones or protected perimeters that would encroach on personal and public rights. I've been asked about the impact on hunting and fishing on our public lands, because that's something that particularly those of us in the West care a great deal about. And I've heard some concerns that there may be negative impacts, but I want to be clear here that the wilderness bills in this agreement actually affirm the responsibility and the authority of the states for the management of fish and wildlife. In the wilderness bills that we have in New Mexico and in Nevada, they have incorporated restating the law, this is Section 302 of FLPMA, to provide assurances that the wilderness designations do not give the secretaries any new authorities to close federal lands to hunting, fishing, or trapping that they don't already have. So we've put in place protections, again, trying to find the balance between the conservation and the development, providing for access, ensuring that private rights are respected, ensuring that our opportunities for use and enjoyment as well as economic activity is preserved, trying to find a package that is balanced from the bicameral, bipartisan perspective, making sure that we are not imposing costs, again, a revenue-neutral proposal. I think that is also worth stressing. I've seen something out there that suggests that there is an impact on direct spending from Title 30, and the fact is that it is revenue neutral over these next 10 years. We do not take anything from the defense authorization perspective within this bill, with this lands package. That was never the intent, it was not the design, and it will not impact that. So with that, Madam President, I will go ahead and yield the floor and reserve the balance of my time.